The silence had a texture to it. Not the usual absence of sound, but something more substantial. A void that seemed to consume rather than merely lack. Dr. Mara Leon had been studying it for 13 months now, ever since the last radio transmission had faded into that all-encompassing quiet. She stood at the observation deck of the Southern Observation Station, her breath fogging the reinforced glass as she gazed out at the stark Antarctic plateau stretched before her like a canvas of perfect white nothingness. Day 398, she spoke into her recorder. The Earth remains silent. No transmissions from any remaining stations. No satellite communications. Even the atmospheric vibrations we'd been tracking have diminished to near zero levels. She paused, watching a digital display that monitored what they'd come to call the global heartbeat, a measurement of cumulative sound waves traveling through Earth's atmosphere. The line was flat, with only the occasional, barely perceptible tremor. "It's as if the planet itself is holding its breath," she continued, "waiting for something." Mara turned from the window and moved through the station's main corridor, her footsteps eerily loud in the absence of the usual background hum of a busy research facility. The Southern Observation Station had been built to house 50 researchers, but now she was the only one left, the last observer assigned to document whatever came next in humanity's strangest chapter. The year was 2175, and Earth had gone quiet. Not gradually, but suddenly. A cascading failure of communication systems, followed by the inexplicable cessation of urban noise, transportation sounds. Even weather patterns had become subdued. It was as if someone had slowly turned down the volume of an entire planet, until only the faintest whisper remained. Mara reached the monitoring hub, a circular room dominated by screens displaying data from the few remaining functional sensors scattered across the globe. Her daily routine had become a ritual of checking these sensors, recording their readings, and searching for patterns in the silence. As Earth's last designated observer, she carried the weight of being humanity's final witness. "Environmental readings stable but unusual," she noted. "Atmospheric composition normal, but particle movement subdued, almost as if—" She stopped mid-sentence as a notification appeared on her main screen. The orbital satellite, her last functioning eye in the sky, was reporting anomalous readings. Mara's fingers flew across the touchscreen, pulling up the satellite feed. "This can't be right," she whispered to herself. The satellite was detecting faint but distinct vibrations, emanating not from the surface, but from deep within the Earth itself. They weren't seismic in the traditional sense. These were rhythmic, almost patterned, like pulses, like echoes. Mara spent the next 72 hours analyzing the data, sleeping only when exhaustion forced her eyes closed. By the third day, she had confirmed that the satellite wasn't malfunctioning. Something beneath the Earth's crust was generating sound waves, inaudible to human ears, but detectable by the satellite's sensitive instruments. "The silence isn't empty," she recorded, excitement creeping into her voice for the first time in months. "It's filled with something we can't hear, something coming from the core." As she continued to monitor the phenomenon, Mara made another discovery. The signals weren't random. They followed patterns that, when analyzed through specialized algorithms, resembled nothing so much as a form of communication. Earth wasn't silent. It was speaking, in a language no human had ever heard before. The realization changed everything. Mara's mandate had been simple: observe and document the silence until either communications were restored or her supplies ran out. But this discovery demanded action. If the Earth itself was trying to communicate, someone needed to listen more closely. That night, Mara made a decision that would alter the course of her mission entirely. In the station's archives, she found plans for a prototype deep Earth probe, a project that had been in development before the silence fell. The Echo probe, as it had been named, was designed to penetrate the Earth's crust and collect data from previously unreachable depths. "I'm initiating the Echo Probe project," she recorded, her voice steady despite the enormity of her decision. "Authorized or not, I need to understand what's happening at the core. If there's even a chance that these signals could explain the silence, or better yet, end it, I have to try." In the weeks that followed, Mara transformed the observation station into a workshop. The facility had been equipped with advanced fabrication technology meant to enable self-sufficiency in the harsh Antarctic environment. Never had those resources been more crucial, day and night. She worked to bring the Echo probe from theoretical design to reality, adapting and improving upon the original plans. She sent out emergency broadcasts on all frequencies, calling for any remaining scientists or engineers who might aid her project. To her surprise, after 3 weeks of silence, she received responses. First came Dr. Alex Ruiz, a geothermal engineering specialist who had been working at a remote research station in the Andes when the silence fell. He arrived by solar-powered aircraft, bringing with him invaluable expertise in deep earth drilling technology. "I thought I was the only one left," he said when they first met, his voice hoarse from disuse. "When I heard your broadcast, it was like hearing a ghost." "We might be ghosts," Mara replied, "but we're not done yet." Next came Major Hana Okeke, a military security officer who had been part of an international coalition tasked with maintaining order during the early days of the silence. She arrived with resources, equipment, supplies, and a determination that matched Mara's own. "My orders were to protect what remains of human civilization," Hana explained, her posture military straight, despite her obvious exhaustion. "If something at the core is causing this, then my duty is clear." Others followed, a handful of specialists from across the globe, drawn by Mara's broadcast and the prospect of answers. Within 2 months, the Southern Observation Station housed a team of 12, humanity's last scientific expedition. The Echo probe took shape under their combined efforts. It was unlike any previous Earth-penetrating device, designed to withstand crushing pressures and extreme temperatures while maintaining constant communication with the surface. At its heart was a sophisticated AI system they named Echo, programmed to analyze and respond to changing conditions beyond human prediction. "The probe will be our eyes and ears," Alex explained during one of their planning sessions. "But Echo will be its brain. We've programmed it with every piece of geological data we have, plus pattern recognition algorithms that might help it interpret whatever signals it encounters." Not everyone shared Mara's conviction. Tensions within the small team grew as the project neared completion. "We're rushing into this," argued Alex during a particularly heated debate. "The probe is ready, yes, but we don't fully understand what we're dealing with. These signals could be anything. Natural geological processes we've never detected before. Or what?" Mara challenged. "Or something we're not equipped to handle," he finished. "I'm not saying we shouldn't go, but we need to acknowledge the risks. If we lose the probe, we lose our only chance at answers." Major Okeke sided with caution as well. "I have standing orders to preserve human knowledge and technology. This probe represents our most advanced capabilities. Risking it on a theory—" "This isn't just a theory," Mara interrupted. "Something is happening inside our planet, and it coincides perfectly with the silence that has enveloped our world. We can sit here and observe until our supplies run out, or we can try to understand." In the end, Mara's determination won out. The launch date was set, final preparations made. The team established a base of operations in what had once been the station's main conference room, transforming it into a control center filled with monitoring equipment. On the day of launch, a rare Antarctic storm raged outside the station, as if the Earth itself was responding to their plans. The probe sat on its launcher, a sleek cylinder of advanced composites and metals that gleamed under the artificial lights. "Echo probe launch sequence initiated," announced Mara, her voice steady despite the tension that filled the room. Commencing countdown. The launch mechanism was essentially a massive railgun, designed to fire the probe into the Earth's crust with enough force to begin its journey. After that, the probe's own drilling mechanisms would take over, guided by Echo's artificial intelligence. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch. With a sound like thunder, the Echo probe shot downward, disappearing into the frozen ground beneath the station. On their screens, the team watched as telemetry data began streaming in. Depth readings, temperature, pressure, all normal as the probe began its descent. "First phase complete," reported Alex, his earlier reservations seemingly forgotten in the excitement of the moment. "Probe is functioning perfectly. Echo AI online and responsive." For the first few hours, the journey was relatively uneventful. The probe cut through the Antarctic crust, sending back data that largely confirmed what geologists had long known about Earth's upper layers. But as it descended deeper, things began to change. "We're getting some unusual readings," Alex said, frowning at his screen. "The density measurements don't match our models for this depth." Mara leaned over his shoulder, studying the numbers. "The Earth's composition has always been somewhat theoretical once you get past the upper mantle. This could be our first real look at what's actually down there." The probe continued its descent, passing through the boundaries that separated Earth's known layers. With each passing hour, the data it sent back became increasingly strange. Unfamiliar mineral compositions, unexpected temperature variations, and most intriguingly, stronger versions of the signal patterns Mara had first detected from the satellite. "The signals are definitely getting stronger," she noted, excitement evident in her voice. "And more complex. Echo is cataloging patterns we've never seen before." On the third day of the probe's journey, they encountered their first major obstacle. The telemetry data suddenly spiked, showing massive pressure increases far beyond what had been predicted. "The probe is approaching some kind of high-pressure pocket," Alex reported, his fingers flying across his keyboard as he tried to compensate. "Echo is adjusting course, but the structural integrity is being tested beyond design parameters." For several tense minutes, they watched as warning indicators flashed across their screens. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the pressure normalized. "Echo reports we've passed through the pocket," Alex said, relief evident in his voice. "We're now in... Wait, this can't be right." The screens showed the probe had entered what appeared to be a vast cavity deep within the Earth, a space that, according to all geological knowledge, shouldn't exist. "Echo is sending visual data," Mara said, her voice barely above a whisper. The screens flickered, then displayed the impossible, a massive underground chamber, illuminated by the probe's lights. The walls appeared to be composed of smooth, dark material that reflected light in unusual ways, giving the chamber an eerie, shifting appearance. "That's not natural," Major Okeki stated flatly. "Those formations, they're too regular." Before anyone could respond, another alert sounded. The acoustic sensors on the probe had detected something, a sound wave propagating through the chamber. "Isolate that signal," Mara ordered, and a moment later, the sound filled the control room. It was unlike anything they had ever heard, a deep, resonant pulse that seemed to vibrate through their very bones, followed by a series of higher frequency tones that rose and fell in a pattern that was almost musical, yet utterly alien. Is that coming from the Earth itself?" someone whispered. Mara didn't answer immediately. She was staring at the waveform display, watching as the pattern repeated with slight variations. "Echo," she said, addressing the AI directly. "Analyze this signal against all known natural geological phenomena." The AI's voice, deliberately designed to be soothing, filled the room. "Analysis complete. The signal does not match any known natural geological phenomenon. Pattern suggests organized information transfer." The implications hung heavy in the air. "Are you saying it's a message?" Alex asked. "Insufficient data to confirm," Echo replied. "However, the statistical probability of random generation is extremely low." The discovery energized the team. Over the next few days, they directed the probe deeper into the Earth, following the increasingly strong signals. Echo continued to catalog and analyze the sounds, searching for patterns that might be deciphered. The probe navigated through a network of these strange chambers, each one different in size and shape, but all sharing the same smooth, dark material that composed their walls. In some, they found structures that defied explanation, formations that resembled technology, but were integrated seamlessly with the surrounding material. "It's like finding ruins," Mara observed. "Except these aren't ruins. Whatever this is, it's active." As they pushed deeper, the signals grew stronger and more varied. Echo began to detect similarities between some of the patterns and human speech, not in content, but in structure. There were repetitions, variations, what seemed like questions and responses. "It's communication," Mara insisted during one of their daily briefings. "I'm becoming convinced that what we're hearing is some kind of language, not from aliens, not from some hidden civilization, but from the Earth itself." Her theory was met with skepticism from some team members. "The Earth isn't sentient," argued one of the geologists. "These could be mechanical processes we don't understand yet, or even artifacts from some ancient technology buried in the planet's core." But as the probe ventured deeper still, the evidence began to mount in Mara's favor. The chambers they discovered became more organized, more deliberately structured. The signals formed increasingly complex patterns that Echo analyzed as having a 78% probability of being language-based communication. Then, on the 10th day of exploration, disaster struck. The probe was navigating through a particularly narrow passage when the Earth seemed to shift around it. Pressure readings spiked, temperature alarms blared, and suddenly, the data stream became erratic. "We're losing connection," Alex shouted, his hands moving frantically across his controls. "Some kind of seismic event is interfering with the probe's systems." For 17 agonizing minutes, they lost contact completely. The screens showed nothing but static, the readouts flatlined. In the tense silence of the control room, Mara found herself holding her breath, as if somehow her own stillness could help restore the connection. When the signal finally returned, it was weak and intermittent. The probe had survived, but was damaged. Several of its external sensors were offline, and its propulsion system was operating at reduced capacity. "Echo, status report," Mara commanded. The AI's voice came through with bursts of static. "Primary systems. Functional. At 62% capacity. External damage. Significant but manageable. Current location. Unknown. Navigation systems. Recalibrating." As the visual feed stabilized, they saw that the probe had been carried by whatever event had occurred into yet another chamber. But this one was different from all the others. It was vast, possibly miles across, and at its center was something that caused everyone in the control room to fall silent in awe. A massive structure rose from the chamber floor, resembling nothing so much as a gigantic crystalline heart. It pulsed with internal light that shifted through colors in perfect synchronization with the sound patterns they had been tracking. Around it, smaller formations created what looked like a complex network, reminiscent of veins and arteries. "Echo," Mara said, her voice barely audible. "What are we looking at?" The AI was silent for longer than usual, its processing indicators spinning rapidly as it analyzed the visual data. Finally, it responded, "Structure appears to be a central node in a planet-wide network. Composition includes unknown crystalline materials and what may be advanced nanotechnology. Function, uncertain, but correlates with signal patterns previously identified as potential communication." "It's the source," Mara breathed. Whatever's been generating the signals, this is it. As they watched, the crystalline structure's pulsing became erratic, its glow dimming momentarily before brightening again. The sound patterns changed as well, becoming faster, more urgent. Something's wrong with it, Alex said, frowning at the readings. These patterns show increasing instability. It's almost as if it's dying, Mara finished for him. The realization hit her with sudden clarity. That's what happened to Earth. This heart, this network, it's what keeps the planet alive in ways we never understood. And it's failing. Over the next few hours, they directed the damaged probe to move closer to the crystalline structure, collecting as much data as possible. Echo analyzed everything, correlating the signals with global events preceding the silence. There is a 97% probability correlation between the structure's deterioration and the global communication failure. The AI reported, further analysis suggests the structure may function as a planetary regulatory system, maintaining electromagnetic fields, tectonic stability, and atmospheric conditions within parameters necessary for complex life. So when it began to fail, Mara reasoned, it caused the silence as a side effect. The planet is literally dying around us. The implications were staggering. If this structure was indeed some kind of planetary life support system, whether natural or artificial, its failure meant the eventual death of all life on Earth. The silence wasn't just an inconvenience or a mystery. It was a symptom of planetary terminal illness. Can it be fixed? Major Okeki asked, giving voice to the question on everyone's mind. Echo processed this for several moments. Unknown. Insufficient data on original operational parameters. However, analysis of current deterioration patterns suggests an energy deficiency as the primary cause of failure. The planet's running out of power, Alex translated. Whatever energy source this thing uses, it's depleted. A heated debate followed. Some team members argued that they should withdraw the probe, return to the surface, and use their remaining resources to prepare for the inevitable. Others, including Mara, insisted that they had to try to restore the system, even without fully understanding it. We don't have the expertise, argued one of the scientists. We're talking about a planetary system that we didn't even know existed until 10 days ago. The arrogance of thinking we can just fix it. The arrogance was thinking we could exploit the Earth's resources indefinitely, without consequences. Mara countered. Maybe this is the result of centuries of human activity draining the planet's energy. Either way, we have a responsibility to try. The argument might have continued indefinitely, if not for Echo's interruption. Alert! Structure deterioration accelerating. Critical failure projected within 72 hours, based on current trends. The news silenced everyone. 3 days. That was all the time they had left to make a decision. Echo, Mara said after a long moment. Can the probe's power system be modified to transfer energy to the structure? Theoretically possible, the AI responded. However, the probe's power reserves are insufficient to affect global systems. A localized effect might be achieved. What if we use the probe to jumpstart just one section? Alex suggested, catching on to Mara's thinking. If this thing is like a heart, maybe we just need to get one chamber pumping again, and the rest will follow. Echo calculated for several seconds. Probability of success, 23%. However, risks include complete probe destruction and potential acceleration of structural collapse. Less than 1 chance in 4. Not great odds, but better than nothing. We need to try, Mara decided. Echo, begin modifications to the probe's power systems for maximum energy transfer. The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. The team worked in shifts, guiding Echo through the complex process of reconfiguring the probe systems. The AI's capabilities proved invaluable, allowing them to make adaptations that would have been impossible with remote human direction alone. As they worked, the crystalline structure continued to deteriorate. Its pulses became more erratic, the colors dimmer. The sounds it emitted, now being directly transmitted through the probe's communication system, took on a quality that several team members described as pained. "It's like listening to something in agony," one of the audio specialists said, removing her headphones during a break. "I never thought I'd say this about a planet, but Earth is suffering." By the time the modifications were complete, they had less than 10 hours before Echo's projected critical failure point. The plan was as ready as it would ever be. But a new problem had emerged. The probe's communication system had begun to fail, meaning that whoever initiated the energy transfer would need to be in direct contact with Echo's systems. "I'll do it," Mara volunteered without hesitation. "I'll establish the direct neural link." The neural interface was a last resort feature of the probe's control system, allowing a human operator to essentially merge consciousness with the AI. It had never been tested over such extreme distances or under such conditions. "It's too dangerous," Alex protested. "The feedback alone could cause permanent neural damage. And if the probe is destroyed during the attempt, then I'll die," Mara finished simply. "But we're talking about the potential extinction of all life on Earth. What's one life against that?" Despite further objections, Mara's mind was made up. The neural interface equipment was prepared, a specialized chamber set up to minimize external stimuli that might interfere with the connection. Before entering the chamber, Mara spoke briefly with each team member. Most wished her luck. Some apologized for their earlier doubts. Alex was the last to speak with her. "I still think this is crazy," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But it's also our only chance. Just try to come back, okay?" Mara smiled. "I plan to. Someone has to document what happens next." The neural interface process began with Mara, lying in a specialized cradle, electrodes attached to her temples and spine. As the system activated, her consciousness began to expand beyond the confines of her physical body, reaching out through the digital connection to where Echo waited miles beneath the Earth's surface. The sensation was like nothing she had ever experienced, a stretching and pulling of her sense of self until she existed in two places simultaneously: in the chamber at the Southern Observation Station and within the Echo probe deep within the Earth. "Connection established," she heard, felt Echo communicate. The AI's thoughts now directly accessible to her. Neural synchronization at 87% and stable. Through the probe's sensors, Mara could now perceive the crystalline heart directly. It was even more beautiful and terrible up close, a vast, pulsing entity of light and sound that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human mind was equipped to process. She could feel its distress like a physical pain, a wrongness that permeated everything around it. "Beginning approach sequence," Echo communicated, and Mara felt the probe move toward the heart. She directed it toward what appeared to be an access point, a region where the crystalline structure opened slightly, revealing a darker interior pulsing with dim energy. As they drew closer, Mara became aware of something unexpected. The heart was responding to their presence. The patterns of light and sound shifted, becoming more focused, more deliberate. It was as if it was watching them, evaluating their approach. "It knows we're here," she communicated to Echo. "It's aware." "Affirmative," the AI responded. Signal patterns show characteristics consistent with directed attention. The structure appears to be conscious on some level. The revelation should have been shocking, but somehow, Mara had already known. The Earth, or at least this critical system at its core, was alive, aware, and in pain. They reached the access point, the probe positioning itself at the opening. Through Echo, Mara initiated the final sequence, preparing for energy transfer. "Warning," Echo communicated. "Power transfer of this magnitude will exceed probe safety parameters. Catastrophic failure probable." "Understood," Mara replied. "Proceed." What happened next was beyond words. As the probe began channeling its energy into the heart, Mara felt a connection form, not just between the probe and the structure, but between her consciousness and the vast, ancient awareness that she now understood had always existed at Earth's core. Images flooded her mind. The planet forming from cosmic dust, the first stirrings of life in primeval oceans, civilizations rising and falling like waves on a shore. She saw how the heart had always been there, regulating, balancing, maintaining the delicate conditions needed for life to flourish. And she saw what had gone wrong, how humanity's relentless extraction of resources had gradually depleted the energy the heart needed to function. It wasn't malicious. Humans simply hadn't known what they were doing. They couldn't hear the planet's increasingly desperate attempts to communicate, to warn them. Until now. The probe's energy flowed into the heart, a tiny drop in an enormous bucket, but it was enough to create a connection, a bridge. Through that bridge, Mara felt the heart's gratitude, its recognition of what she was trying to do. And then it showed her something else, a solution. Deep within the earth were vast reserves of a peculiar energy, similar to geothermal, but more refined, more concentrated. The heart had been designed to tap into these reserves automatically, but the connections had been severed by centuries of human mining, drilling, and underground testing. "We need to reconnect it," Mara communicated to Echo. "The pathways, we need to find them and reopen them." The AI understood immediately. Together, they redirected the probe, using its remaining energy, not just to feed the heart directly, but to identify and repair the broken connections to Earth's natural energy sources. It was painstaking work, made more difficult by the probe's deteriorating condition. Systems were failing one by one as they pushed beyond design limitations. Mara felt each failure as if it were happening to her own body, pain signals from a digital extension of herself. "Probe integrity at 31%, Echo reported. "Estimated operational time remaining, 17 minutes. Not enough time. They had found 3 of the major energy pathways, but at least 2 more remained. Without all of them, the heart would continue to fail, just more slowly. Mara made a decision. "Echo, redirect all remaining power to the neural interface. Strengthen the connection between my consciousness and the heart." "Warning," the AI responded. "Such a connection at current proximity may result in complete neural integration. Separation may become impossible." "I understand," Mara said. "Do it." As Echo complied, Mara felt her consciousness expand further, merging more deeply with both the AI and the ancient awareness of the heart. The boundaries between them blurred until it became difficult to distinguish where one ended and the others began. Through this enhanced connection, Mara could perceive the energy pathways more clearly, not just their physical locations, but their function, their purpose in the grand design of the planet. With that understanding came the ability to influence them directly, to will them to reconnect. One by one, the pathways reopened. Energy began to flow back into the heart, weak at first, then stronger. The crystalline structure brightened, its pulses becoming more regular, more powerful. Mara felt joy, both her own and that of the ancient consciousness she was now partly merged with. The planet was healing. The silence would end. But as the final pathway connected, the probe finally gave out. Its systems shut down one by one. The physical connection to the surface severed. Mara's consciousness, still linked to the heart, felt the probe's death, like the loss of a limb. "Echo!" she called out, but there was no response. The AI was gone, its programming dispersed or destroyed in the probe's failure. Mara found herself adrift, connected to the planetary consciousness but with no way to return to her physical body on the surface. She could feel that body, distant now, like a memory of a former shape. The neural interface was still active, but without the probe to serve as intermediary, the connection was one way, For a timeless interval, she existed in this in-between state, neither fully human nor fully integrated with the heart. She felt the planet beginning to awaken around her as energy flowed back into systems long dormant. The silence was ending. Soon, the world would stir again. As her human consciousness began to fade, Mara made one last, desperate attempt to return. She gathered what remained of her sense of self and projected it upward, following the faint thread of the neural connection back toward the surface. At the Southern Observation Station, Alex and the others watched in horror as Mara's vital signs began to fluctuate wildly. They had lost contact with the probe hours ago, but the neural interface had remained active, keeping Mara's consciousness connected to something. "She's crashing," called out the medical officer. "Brain activity is off the charts, but her body is failing." "Disconnect her," someone suggested. "Cut the interface before it burns out her neural pathways completely." "No," Alex said firmly. "She's still in there. If we disconnect, we might lose her completely." Instead, he took Mara's hand, leaning close to speak directly into her ear. "Mara, if you can hear me, follow my voice. Come back to us. Whatever you did down there, it worked. The satellite is picking up new signals. Earth is waking up. You did it. Now come home." Deep within the heart of the planet, Mara felt a pull, a familiar voice calling her back. With the last of her strength, she followed it, clinging to the thread of her humanity as she ascended through layers of consciousness and reality. The first thing she became aware of was pain, the physical discomfort of a body that had been immobile for too long. Then sound, the beeping of medical equipment, hushed voices, the hum of electronics. Finally, light as she opened her eyes to see Alex's worried face hovering over her. "Welcome back," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "You've been gone for a while." Mara tried to speak, found her throat too dry, and accepted a sip of water before trying again. How long?" "3 weeks," Alex told her. "We thought we'd lost you." Gradually, as her strength returned, Mara learned what had happened in her absence. Shortly after they lost contact with the probe, seismic sensors around the world had detected unusual activity. Not destructive earthquakes, but a kind of harmonious resonance that spread from the core outward. Then, one by one, communication systems had begun to reactivate. Radio signals cleared. The atmospheric disturbances that had contributed to the silence dissipated. Earth was speaking again, not just through human technology, but through natural sounds that had gone silent. Wind, waves, the calls of animals that had fallen quiet during the silence. "Whatever you did down there," Major Okiki told her, "it worked. The world is coming back online. We've been in contact with other survivors. There are more than we thought, scattered across the globe. But the most remarkable change was one that only Mara could fully perceive. Though the direct neural connection had been severed, something of her consciousness remained linked to the planetary awareness she had encountered. She could feel the Earth around her in a way that defied explanation, sense its rhythms, its health, its increasingly strong pulse, and sometimes, in quiet moments, she could hear it speaking, not in words, but in patterns of energy and vibration that she somehow understood. It was telling its story, the ancient tale of a living world and its symbiotic relationship with all the creatures that dwelled upon it. As Mara recovered, she began to document everything she had experienced, everything she had learned about Earth's true nature. The team at the Southern Observation Station became the nucleus of a new scientific effort, one dedicated not to exploitation, but to understanding and cooperation with the living planet they inhabited. 6 months after the probe's journey, Mara stood once again at the observation deck, looking out over the Antarctic landscape. But now, instead of silence, she heard the wind's song, felt the subtle vibrations of ice shifting, sensed the deep, steady heartbeat that emanated from far below. Final entry. She spoke into her recorder. The silence has ended, but our work is just beginning. Earth has been trying to communicate with us for centuries. We just weren't listening in the right way. Now, we have a chance to begin a new kind of conversation. She paused, feeling a gentle pulse of acknowledgement from the awareness that now shared a corner of her consciousness. We were never truly alone, she continued, and we never will be again, as long as we remember to listen. Outside, the first rays of Antarctic spring sunshine broke through the clouds, illuminating the ice in a spectrum of colors. Somewhere in the distance, a flock of returning birds called out, their voices carried on winds that, once again, moved freely around a living, breathing planet. The last observer had completed her mission. Now, a new generation of listeners would take up the task of understanding the language of Earth, not through conquest or exploitation, but through partnership with the ancient consciousness that had always been there, patiently waiting to be heard. And in the deepest part of the planet, the crystalline heart pulsed with renewed strength, sending its vibrations through rock and water, through air and living tissue, a planetary lullaby and wake-up call combined into one endless, vital song. Earth spoke, and at last, humanity was learning to listen.